G'day everyone, welcome back to Bulwarks and Bulldust Season 3. I'm joined by Shane from Doyle Sails and Zen Racing Team, just back from the Admiral's Cup in the UK. Thanks for coming on the show, Shane.
No worries, thanks for having us.
Let's get him in the chair and have a chat. G'day everyone and welcome back to Season 3 of Bulwarks and Bulldust. I'm Lee Randall, on my right Wally Tench and on my left John Curnow, and today we are lucky enough to be joined by Shane Guanaria from Doyle Sails and the Zen Racing program. I've never met this guy before. How you going, Sean?
I'm all right, thanks Lee. Nice to meet you too for about the 18th time, I believe. Yeah.
You've had a pretty big couple of months. I mean, the return of the Admiral's Cup and the big effort from you and Gordon to get the team together and have some pretty good results.
Pretty amazing effort when you consider that the boat was late to leave, to go there, so that adds yet another level of stress. Thank God you took the rod rigging with you, and when the synthetic broke you were able to put the rod back in. But an amazing effort to still finish second, and even then only just by the 1 point, you know. Do you sit there with a could have been, should have been, want to be, or go, wow, what a great effort to go halfway across the world and achieve this with the team?
Yeah, the could have beens and the should have beens, they're not even mentioned with the whole team. You know, we were just lucky to be on the start line, and for a couple of reasons. You know, one, if the rigging failure had, you go back to the boat, if the boat had been another few days late, we wouldn't have made measurement, and whether they would have let us sail or not over there, who knows. Literally the day we got the rig in was the day the boat was measured and signed off on the 4th of July. And then with the rigging, when that failed, if that had been 15 knots and we're coming out of attack and winding a runner up, the mast would have fell down, just like what happened a few days later to the poor guys on Red Bandit. You know, same failure, and it's a different product, but same thing happened to them, and their mast went over the side. And a couple of days later, creepily enough, the sister ship, the Red Bandit, with a boat in the Southport race, Denali, they lost their rig in a very similar fashion with a rigging failure too. So, you know, we're very, very lucky it was flat water and 7-8 knots. And, you know, we're just winding the rig up for the first time, so taking things pretty slow and quick enough to respond. So, you know, yeah, lucky to have a mast, lucky that when we went through the conversion 2 years ago to the carbon rigging, we were adamant that, you know, if we go travelling, we want that option to be able to go back to the rod, not thinking we'd ever need it, but planned it that way, and it was a very quick turnaround. You know, we're lucky Bruce Clark from Sydney Rigging was in Southampton at the time with we came with our rigging initially, and he was with the Whisper team, and he jumped on a boat straight away and came across, and we had the rig out that afternoon and the new rigging going in over the weekend. Yeah,
well, he's pretty amazing, and what a reputation as well with blackjack and everything too. So what a great reputation and a wonderful. Would have been a lot of people jumping on to get the job done, but then that had been literally the case from the time the boat had left Australia. So
but the problem was keeping a lot of people. Everyone wanted their hands on the ball. You know, it was a pretty serious situation we found ourselves in, and everyone wanted a hand on the ball, so we were actually managing people and just dragging them away and letting Clarkie do his thing with a few helpers and work away on you know, getting it all back together and getting us out there sailing.
I guess in a lot of ways, you know, people might use the term unofficial captain of the team and all the rest of it. You were certainly the figurehead. They loved to put even more and more sailbags, if you like, around your neck as the profile of the whole thing went on. But I guess looking back on it, even though it's only just finished, looking back on it now, what a great effort to be part of it after the 22-year hiatus. You know, filled you full of joy, and Gordon as well. He's happy that it all happened.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a bit longer to get into that level of joy looking back on it. You know, I was up at Hamilton Island, and people, I got up there a couple of days early to put a boat together for race week. And people were just coming up and patting you on the back and saying, well done, awesome effort. I had calls from other people in the sail-making industry and messages while we were over there, but it just took that bit of time to sink in, as a massive 6-week effort that I was there for 2 weeks with Sean's boat. We were quite involved in that program as well. And then with Zen. And, at the end of the Fastnet, someone asked me, oh, you must be so happy. I said, no, I'm just relieved. And it certainly took a little bit of time to sink in, but now there's nothing but smiles about it. I wish I could go and do it again tomorrow. It was an awesome event, and we're so lucky. Everyone that was part of it was lucky to be a part of that event.
I think one of the interviews I saw, might have been YouTube, you were being interviewed, you said the lump had gone from here, I think, down, you'd felt it sort of dropped down to further down in the chest after a little while. Obviously a lot of stress involved in getting the boat prepared and getting over there and that event that happened. For people that are listening, we get a lot of listeners that aren't, sailing professionals, obviously, or some of them haven't even been on a boat before. So just the Admiral's Cup, could you maybe unpack that a little bit for some of our listeners? Because it's an incredible event with a lot of offshore and inshore parts to it. Could you sort of just take us through briefly what that looks like and what the competition's like?
Yeah, well, it's what yachting's been missing for 22 years. A pinnacle event for mixed classes of boats to go and race each other. From around the world. You've got the key races that happen annually or biannually, and you get a yacht here or there travel. But they get a bunch of owners that were willing to ship their boats in from different places to this one event. It was for us, I look at it as like a one-off. If it's the only time I get to do the Admiral's Cup, I'm happy with that. But it is, we viewed it as the unofficial World Championship of Yachting. It's a great mix of passage racing, ocean racing and windward leeward racing. A lot of the races were scored differently. They were weighted with their scoring. I don't know how to describe it to the non-sailors, but it's kind of it's kind of like taking your over 40 soccer team with all of your mates and playing Manchester United in a lot of ways. If I can put it like that, it was just an awesome experience to be in amongst those boats, delivery on the boats, the bow jests and the jolt boats. It was a really cool thing to be around.
Because obviously the Zen program's been very strong over the last few years, but when you compare it to, say, the Monegasque boats and the bow jest boats and that, it's no newcomer.
No, she was actually one of the oldest boat there. I think the second oldest boat to Red Bandit in the end in the Division 1. Even a timber boat was built only a few years ago. The German boat is a lovely piece of work, that. But it's just been a slow refinement over the last 2 years. We got the boat in 2019 and straight away, having come out of the Med, it was a very competitive boat round the Cairns. But then as the fleet developed here, we started to struggle. The boat had some flaws in it in terms of a super strong upwind and quite weak downwind. And, we went with Gordon about just improving those areas. And then when the Admiral's Cup was committed, we looked at how we, compete against the expected boats. We didn't know exactly what we're competing against there, but you had to guess. And no matter what we did to the boat, we weren't going to make it get to the top mark first against those newer boats. So we optimised the boat and we got the rating down to get it away from them. So they were tacking on us up a beat. We had them beat anyway. We had enough time up our sleeves with rating that all we had to do was work hard, start well, work hard, get round the corners in good shape, and hopefully those guys, they all just had eyes for each other. The bow jest and the jolt and the caro. They all rated so tightly that they would cross us, let us go, and then tack on the next boat on the hip if that was closer to them. So
it gave you a bit of a lane every now and again to get through?
Yeah, we were a little bit forgotten. And the last day of inshore racing suddenly had 3 races because we lost a day in the middle there. And we had a really good day that day. And then I think it was like, oh, well, maybe we've, with all the dramas Zen had, we took our eye off the ball a little bit. And we really had, for the majority, free play at a course of where we wanted to go, which was great. And certainly helped that, Nico, I've never seen anyone get off the start line so consistently well. If he wanted a pin, he won the pin. And, I think I said it to a few people that I've never seen someone position a boat for 3 minutes in a way that no one else was going to take that pin off him. So in that 3 minutes of circling and jousting and positioning, no one was going to be at the right spot with 45 seconds to go because he just didn't let it happen. And it was just incredible to watch. Really, different level of sailor I'm used to, that we've been sailing with. It was very good.
Yeah, but touching on that, I mean, obviously you had a good core that you just plugged pros into for the unofficial World Championship of Sailing, but you still took a lot of your core crew from Sydney, right?
Yeah, I think we're probably one of very few boats in that Admiral's Cup where we had, 65% of the crew fly themselves over there to be part of it. And took time off work and time away from families, very much a Corinthian effort and complimented. And at the end of the day, what I liked was there was no tomorrow for those guys. There was no next job. This was it. This was their pinnacle of their sailing over the next little bit, and they worked their rings off. I think they just worked harder. They just wanted it more. And you looked at what we managed to do around the corners. There's one top mark in particular where the wind had shifted, a very short top mark. We set between gates and then rolled straight into a jibe. And the boat behind us was a full pro team with some of the best sailors in the world, and they couldn't pull that manoeuvre off. And the boat behind them was another full pro team, and they couldn't pull that manoeuvre off. And that's a race we ended up winning over the line as well. And that was a very satisfying moment that I look back on and think, well, there's a lot to be said for having guys that just want to be there,
Yeah, I mean, they always say when it comes to war, give me an army of people defending their homeland, and same sort of mentality of ensuring that the passion drives the program, and that's very much been the case. I guess the other part of it is that if you look at it, the dare we say it, tokenism of only the one female, that put a lot of pressure on them that was unfair because there are so many great female sailors. We had a chat with this and indeed editorialised about this, and the link will be available at the bottom of the description. But the big thing is that everybody that I've spoken with is ready for the next one, and let's hope that it all comes about. But probably the biggest thing was that there are a couple of really big events this year. One was the Fastnet, what a massive fleet of 466 boats or whatever it was, and the 80th Hobart in a couple of months as well, also set to be really big. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to have the Fastnet to finish out a magnificent regatta, and then obviously we're looking towards the end of the year for the 80th Hobart. Can you have a look at those two things for us, please?
Yeah, it's a good question. They're quite different races and quite different atmospheres. Certainly you get that atmosphere around Cows leading up to the Fastnet, which we didn't really get to enjoy a lot because we were working on the boat. Like even a day before, we were out sailing and going through our reefing again because we lost that, 10 days of sea trials before the series started. And then you go into the starting day of all those boats around, and that congested start line mixed in with 3 or 4 knots of current off the Royal Yacht Squadron there. It's quite stressful, but also just the sheer amount of boats blows your mind. The foreshores aligned, and you really are managing your boat to make sure you get it across that start line without incident as well. There's a lot of people trying to jostle for the same areas, and the start intervals weren't too far apart. So the next start was trying to squeeze in and get their little pings done and everything like that too. So the potential for, damage in that pre-start was quite high. So stress levels were rather high until we started to spread out up there. And then you're going past all of these landmarks that I've only ever seen the photos of, some of the great Fastnet starts. And some great little places you've never been to. You think, oh geez, that'd be nice to come back and visit that place, And then you get out of the Solent, and the fleet starts to spread out a bit, and you start to get focused back on your own fleet there. The Hobart, I've always said there's nothing like a Hobart start. It's something you really should enjoy. There's less boats, but then you're taking the spectators and the helicopters and all of that associated noise. That's something you don't often experience in yachting, where you can't actually talk to the guy 3 people in front of you because the helicopters are buzzing overhead, and you've got boundaries with spectator boats and that whole sort of amphitheatre setup. It's a very different vibe, but both races are equally as thrilling to be a part of in that start time. Yeah.
I guess with the start of the Hobart, the wash and everything can really add to interesting swells off the Manly Circle and all the rest of it. So it just becomes a wonderful experience, mostly, I suppose. And you're certainly looking for the clear air. But what is the program for you for the Hobart? What are we looking at, Shane?
There's a fair bit on the table at the moment. There's a couple of bits of good news in that Sean Langman's bringing his GP42 back from England to do the Hobart, and he's asked me to sail with him on that. I've been part of Bacchanal, which is a US-owned JPK 1180 that was built in Australia, and I've just finished Hamilton Island with them. They're going again this year. The owner, we broke the boom in last year's Hobart, and the owner's got unfinished business and wants to come back and tick that box. And we got most of the Zen crew, a lot of the Zen guys involved in that boat. And then there is a slim chance that Zen will be back as well for the ADF. And at the moment where it stands, as of today, the instructions are if I can get it on a ship and get it back by a certain date in December, then Gordon will commit to it. But we're not going to have another land on the 22nd of December and get it ready for the 26th. We're not going to play that game. But that's proving difficult. We're doing the Middle Sea in end of October.
Another great event.
Yeah, so, for Gordon, I mean, imagine being able, and for myself too, the idea of being able to tick off Fastnet, Middle Sea and Hobart in the space of 5 months is pretty awesome opportunity to have. So, they're the three things on the table at the moment for Hobart, and of course I might just take a day off and enjoy Christmas Day as well.
Yeah. Good luck with that program. Somebody's bound to come along and put the spanner in the works on that one. That's for sure. But yeah, look, it's a wonderful thing, and I think on behalf of everybody, as proud Australians, well done on the whole of the Admiral's Cup / Fastnet. Well done to Gordon. Obviously, well done to Sean Langman as well, and all of the crew. And like you were saying, so many of them have day jobs, real jobs, and all committed to it. So from everybody that we speak with, a big thank you to you and everybody that partook on board, both Zen and Back to Black.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's an awesome thing to be a part of.
So speaking of day jobs, obviously there's been a bit of a change in the landscape over the last couple of years. You've been a pivotal figure at Doyle Sails Australia for quite a few years now, obviously from the McDiarmid days all the way through Doyle's, and you're now the main man in Australia. I mean, it's changed lately, right?
Yeah, it has. It's been, I bought the Sydney Doyle loft in 10 years ago this year, actually, in 2015. And you could see the writing on the wall there. They were recruiting quite a good team of people. I went on that search looking for a product to service the Grand Prix boats that we had previously relied on commercially available products. But, I saw the writing on the wall with how the industry was going, how technology was making its way into sail making from other industries. And I thought, as an independent loft, you're really going to struggle to keep a good foothold in that fleet, and you needed to make sure you had that technology behind you. And since we joined, the push has been amazing. Mike Sanderson has led that with a really dedicated and talented group of people. Across the board, from some fantastic project managers to sailors and sail designers, engineers and material scientists. They've really developed that product. I don't know if it's the right word, but exponentially over that 10 years since I first got my my first stratus membrane on the floor. So but obviously last year there was 12 months ago was that change where North Technology Group bought out the Quantum Sail Design and Doyle Group to roll into their portfolio of marine related businesses. And, quite frankly, not a lot's changed. A couple of, if anything, it's just been positives. We've got some machinery in the UK, in New Zealand now in the Stratus factory that we wouldn't have had without their investment. And, for us, manufacturing sales, we've got access to, different bits of hardware and detail that we previously didn't have. So, we're still a privately owned business. I own my business and so do all of the other owners in Australia. I think that's a really important thing to point out. While they bought the brand, they haven't bought our businesses. I own everything inside my four walls. As do 47 out of the 50 Doyle lofts worldwide. Really day to day, nothing's changed in that regards. It's just keeping up with supply and demand and following through and introducing the new products that they're developing in New Zealand and Europe into the Australian markets.
I mean, Doyle's done a great job with the Stratus product, especially in that Grand Prix sector. You don't give away anything to North, really, on the day-to-day.
No, I mean, the huge focus has been around the Grand Prix side of things, and that's obviously the core of our business too here in Australia. You look at a lot of the current fleets, and we've actually got the majority of the Grand Prix boats now. And but what surprised me was how many performance cruising boats got into the strata stuff as well. That appreciated a 40% less weight in their rig and a nice sail shape. That wasn't the purpose of joining Doyle. It certainly was for the Grand Prix focus, but we're still doing a lot of, performance cruising sales in Stratus as well. So it's quite a, modular product. You can pick and choose your fibres and your surfaces and your DPIs and that to get whatever product you think is right for the boat and the applications that you're going to be used for.
Cool. So the future is bright for Doyle's and nothing's really changed as far as the product separation is concerned at this stage.
No, it hasn't, and I don't think we'll see too much change either. It's still quite a competitive industry. I'm not walking into the doors at North and asking for, their rig files or anything like that of a boat that we picked up, and they're not walking in the Doyles asking for stuff either. There's no sharing of any information. The relationships with the staff and the other businesses are still the same as they've been. Always good for a good day and a chat. At the end of the day, we're all in the industry because we've got something in common, and there's really been minimal change. If anything, it's been a positive for Doyle's in the fact that North felt that they needed to buy us out. That's probably the biggest bonus for us at the end of the day. Yeah.
Well, we'll get your URL up on the screen at the appropriate time when the editing boys will have a look at that, and people can click through and have a look at your website and find out more about what Doyle's offer. That's Sydney-based sail loft, correct?
Yeah, my business is Sydney, but we're Australian-wide. We've got full manufacturing lofts in Tasmania, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane and Early Beach. We're pretty much all hands-on manufacturing our own sails that we sell. It's a bespoke product. At the end of the day, every boat's different, so every sail's going to be different. So I think that's probably the big advantage we've had in that we haven't had to rely on just 1-800 China type stuff where product A is pretty much the same as product C.
Just don't take it out in the sunlight or get it wet, and it's fine.
No, that's what we always say, a lifetime warranty until you get it wet.
That's right.
But the manufacturing side of it for us as Doyle has been going great. We've all got good staff numbers in our businesses and around Australia, and as a group we keep working hard together.
Fantastic. Well, I was going to take you back a little bit, back before, obviously, Admiral's Cup, way back. We were talking before we started shooting today, and you were talking a little bit about your family and your family history. But for the young people listening, people that are thinking about getting into sailing, maybe talk a little bit about the pathway that you took, and maybe even just sort of touch on sort of the family. It does sound like it's in the DNA. It sounds like you were drawn to the sea, and ultimately that was where you're going to spend a lot of your life because of who you are and the family history. But there was also a history of making violins as well you touched on, so that was quite interesting. But yeah, maybe the pathway would be great for listeners.
Yeah, so, my dad just wanted to learn how to sail. The ancestors, they bought big fishing smacks from Italy across to the east coast of Great Britain in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and basically started the fishing industry there. And then it, skipped a few generations, and then Dad, living around Alton Broad, decided one day he wanted to go sailing, and he got pushed out in a little timber dinghy of a cotton sail and said, fine, go and teach yourself how to sail. And that's what he did. And it was ingrained in him from, 7, 8 years of age. And, I don't want to embarrass him, but, Dad could never swim. He could do enough to keep himself afloat if he went overboard, but he's not, not a strong swimmer by any stretch of the imaginations, and he was just something that he loved, and nothing was going to stop him doing it. Not even the birth of me or my sister. The week later we're down a little dinghy sailing club as a 3 or 4 day old baby, because it's Saturday and he goes sailing on Saturdays, and that didn't change for a long time. He went through dinghies into keelboats as sort of my business developed, and started going down the keelboat path a bit too, he's sort of out of boats himself at the moment, but he's still out there sailing with different people and crewing on different boats at a reasonably competitive level. I don't think you'll ever knock that out of him.
So obviously, you learnt from a very early age from your dad, and what was your pathway like?
Well, my first day sailing, I think I was 3 or 4 years old, and he chucked me in the front of a taser for a frostbite series, and he just sat me in the middle of the boat, and he tacked the jib and the main and poled out the jib and jibed it and went round, and we won the race because there was 4 knots of breeze, and I was probably about 15 kilos at the time, and that was my first exposure to sailing. And it's awesome that you just took that on. These days it's probably would be almost frowned upon, but
it's a path well travelled though. I mean,
it is.
Tasers, NS14s and Hobie 16s. That's the way a lot of kids learn how to sail. Was at the front while the mum or the dad did everything else.
Well, Dad was in the 505s too, and I followed into that. I love that boat. I think it's one of the best boats ever designed, and I'd love to go back and sail those things again. But after that, as I got older, Dad got me into the Flying 11 and Mountie Junior scene at Middle Harbour Yacht Club, and I started crewing at 6 years of age a guy called Anthony Nossiter, who's quite well known in quite well known in yachting circles, and we sailed together for a couple of seasons in the Flying 11s, and I learned a lot of culture from Knocker as a 14-year-old and as a
Is that what you call it? Culture?
Is that the new official term?
Culture.
I learned some culture from my colleagues.
Is someone going to call Bulldust on that?
I think we've just done that. Yeah. And sorry, Shane, but that's Bulldust.
And we went on, and I remember, everyone would know Knocker was a big bloke, and Dad always tells the story of taking him to McDonald's as a 14-year-old at St. Broke, and he would get the family meal of 4 burgers and 4 chips and have that to himself, But, following Knocker's career as a young kid and watching him go through the lasers and then into the fins, I kind of idolised him and followed that path and went into lasers and saw what was possible, what options were there after, the junior classes. I think I was in them at 15 and watched, people like the Brendan Caseys and the Michael Blackburns and the Glenn Burke was sailing at that point too. And, I was lucky enough that I got selected for the Australian youth team in '99 in the laser class. We went to Finland and raced over there and up until the Admiral's Cup, that was probably the highlight of my sailing life. And it's been a shame that Australia hasn't had a team for the last 5 or 6 years for kids to aspire to. It could be the closest we ever get to an Olympics. And certainly there's people I raced against at those worlds that have gone on to, represent their countries in Olympics, and it's awesome to look back on, being able to share the water and the race course with those people back then. And then even locally in Australia, like the year after I went, Ben Austin went. He won a gold medal in the Youth Worlds, but then went on to 49ers and that with Nathan Outridge to Olympics in Beijing. And then Ben Lamb was a year after that, and Tom Slingsby was a year after that. It worries me the hole it's leaving, not having those paths to all those goals they're aimed for, and I think I do believe they've announced they're going to actually send a team this year or next year. I can't quite remember which one, but I think it was a terrible mistake to not have that path for young sailors to follow.
Well, a lot of them went off into skiff land and all the rest of it, where they got paid instead of playing around in the one design classes, and it probably has left a maybe not generational gap, but certainly a big chunk of people. And everybody I speak to, including yourself, indicates that the energy that goes into campaigning for a youth worlds is as close as you're ever going to get to that Olympic scenario, until, of course, you make the Olympic scenario, and it's something that can't be taught. It has to be experienced.
If you make the Olympic scenario.
Yeah, and that's a big if, like a couple of sailors have gone to 3 in a row. That takes up a spot which hundreds of kids might have wanted, and really, I came to the conclusion in 2001, we went to the Irish Worlds in the lasers, and I looked at it and I thought, I can keep doing this, I can keep on this bandwagon, keep travelling, keep spending money I don't have, but the reality is I wasn't a generational sailor. I was good at what I did, but I wasn't that generational talent, and you watch Tom Slingsby coming through, and and obviously Ben and the two Bens, Ben Lamb and Ben Austin and that, and they had my measure at a young age. So, I decided at that point that it was just go and focus on your career, and that's when I started getting into yachts. And a couple of years after that Worlds, I was doing my first Hobart and starting to do some Sydney 38 racing and all of that sort of stuff, and that sort of was kicking on with the keelback career.
Well, yeah, and of course Australia is just so utterly blessed with everybody from Matt Wern, Tom Burton, sometimes doesn't get as many mentions, but, gold medal and a world champion. So, you're definitely there, Tom. There really are just so many people inside that sphere, and they're all exceptional. And it is a great thing to be a part of and to be inside that loop. And you've gone on to go and do so many other wonderful things, including, of course, as you mentioned, the Admirals.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to, realise what, opportunities are there. You look at how many people you grow up sailing against and how many Olympic spots there are once every 4 years, your chances are pretty slim. And I remember when I was in the 505s and I was the president of the Australian Association, we tried to tee up with the 420s and get some, come and sail a 505 day or do Sails Sydney on the same racetrack. And we managed to get that, but we weren't allowed our boats at Middle Harbour where the 420s and 470s were. We were from Balmoral. But on the racetrack, these kids were standing up looking at these 505s saying, how cool is this? And I tried to work with the different presidents at the different times to say, well, come on, it's not about taking them from 420s or 470s and that perceived path. It's about keeping them in the sport. Because, there's so many 505 owners out there that needed a 90 kilo crew. And not everyone coming through 420s was going to stay at 70 kilos. And we were trying to grab them and get them in and get these people on the water and keep them sailing their boats. And but the pushback was incredible, and I just thought, well, half of these kids are going to disappear from the sport, and they have. The names, I think back on, but we're in the 420s then, they're not sailing now. And I think it's good to go through the process and get exposure to those higher level guys, and you can learn the lessons about, managing a campaign and or managing a race, managing a campaign, managing yourself. Those opportunities to go and grab a 16 out of Manly or St George or Belmont, they're there to help you out. And those clubs are doing so much more for sailing and getting people into it than what our Olympic classes are at the moment. You walk around Hamilton Island Race Week last week and you'll see more people out of Manly skiff club up there than what you will out of the, Olympic classes racing on yachts. And that's important to keep boats on the water, keep people competing at events.
I've never sailed a 5.0. Watched them, Lake Macquarie actually, a lot. Unbelievable. Everybody I speak to says, 5.0, 5.0, you know, and they are a rocket ship. Can you just highlight to people, because it isn't always about the same classes, and these other classes do deserve their time in the sun. Can you just give us a couple of minutes on why everybody kowtows to the 5.0? Because, I mean, they're fantastic to watch.
It's a real boat.
It is a real boat.
Look, for me, as an adult's boat, I could fit in it. And I'm bigger than what I was then when I was steering them, but I'm certainly a wire type weight these days. But you know, they could carry a bit of weight. So as an adult growing up, you weren't, you know, for me, there's no way I could go and sail an NS14 at, you know, 80 kilos in the back of it. And those
You'll be
options.
submarining around the place.
Yeah, handstanding. But the thing for me was, if you're sailing along on the boat and you didn't like it and it didn't feel right, you could change something. You could sit there and I've got a video from a coach boat I was going upwind where you could just see the boat chopping wood, and you see me lean in. And I know what I did. I used a forestay back, and then when I came back out, pulled the side stays on, and then the boat just lit up, and it stopped doing that and just started doing that. And suddenly I was using this much main sheet to keep it going and not this much main sheet to keep it going. You know, you just had those tools. And a lot of people say there's too many tools, but it teaches you how to sail. And I know, you know, like 29ers is pretty limited what you can do. Nathan Outridge has done 505s, as did his dad, and he credits the 420, for instance, with a lot of his knowledge on rigs. You know, he came through the 29ers, out of flying 11s into 29ers, got into the 420s. If he went 29ers, 49ers, he would have missed out that critical part of being able to set up a mainsail and set up a rig. You know, they can adjust their gate and their spreaders and things like that. And the 505 is kind of that on steroids. You know, you can adjust everything. My centreboard used to swing and go up and down vertically, and you've got your side stays and your forestays, and you've got a mast ram, which is on a string. You know, your trapeze, where they came out of the mast, I could adjust from the cockpit of the boat too. So you had everything at your fingertips to change how the boat would behave and react, and it teaches you a lot that's, you know, relevant in yachts. You know, you're sitting there and you're sailing and it doesn't feel right, and while you're probably more limited, you still think, well, hang on, we should try this with the mast and then see how it works. And that's where I think the 505s have just can teach people so much, but they're also just such a joy to sail. You know, we've got one, you're powered up in 8 knots of breeze and you're not going home to change rigs. You've got the same main and jib that you've got to get through to 25 knots of breeze. So you learn to use the tools to do it.
Yeah, so tweaker's delight.
Yeah,
Tweaker's delight.
It is, and that's what sort of led me into the Etchell class a little bit too. They were a similar boat. You know, when I you know, had my time, I guess, with dinghies and wanted to try something else. The Etchells was a great choice there too. Yeah,
I found the Figaro Beneteau 3, the tweaker's delight of the larger craft. More strings than a box of tea bags. Yep.
You'll have to explain the tweaker's delight to me later, John, but it's probably not the kind of tweaker that I'm thinking of.
No, this is the PG version.
Okay,
Wallace,
all right.
The PG version.
Thank you, John, for clearing that up. We've got Mel Page coming on too during this series, CEO of Australian Sailing. Just be interested in Shane's thoughts. You've unpacked a little bit about pathways, but any message to Australian sailing while you've got the microphone there in front of you about...
Don't hold back, mate. Don't hold back.
It's funny that you bring that
And we'll
up.
call the ambulance now for the hospital pass.
Yeah. No, it's funny you bring that up because I called Paigey today. It was announced and I just said why, but it's going to be great having I had a couple of good catch-ups with him up at Hamo and talked through a few things that, I was looking at and struggling to comprehend why from the outside. And, you got the right guy. Paigey was in the Flying 11s when I started with Knocker, and he's gone through those pathways himself, in the 505s too, funnily enough, and then the 470s with the Olympic campaigning. And I think, the biggest thing I always said is that I went to a radial Youth Worlds the year before I went to the Youth Worlds, and there was two of us there, myself and Joe Dickenberg from Australia, and we had nothing. We just rocked up by ourselves, and every morning was spent trying to find someone to take our lunch out because the race course was, we're 8-9 hour days on the water. The other countries had coach boats and managers on shore helping the kids and things like that. Now you can go overboard, like you see some of the Optimist kids out of Wallara these days. They basically get told where they should launch their boat and when they should pull them out, and they just follow the coach boat round in between races, and then they get told, right, it's 5 minutes, you got to go. It's probably going a bit far, but there was no support back then, and I'm old now, so this is a long time ago, and they only wanted to know about me when I actually qualified for the Youth Worlds, and then we got a coach and we got some training programs and some help from that. So I think what we need to do is go back to that, is just identifying a bit earlier, getting some training groups going as kids are coming through, out of the junior classes into the intermediate classes like 420s and lasers, and having some training camps, getting people used to being in that mindset and working together like Michael Blackburn did with the laser guys, and that's proved a pretty successful
Not a bad model for
16
results,
years
is it?
of laser sailing for us, and get people working together, not against each other.
Well, there's many sports sporting governing bodies that focus on the elite level or the Olympic level and forget the grassroots and forget what's feeding all of that initially and bringing people up through those different pathways.
Well, as kids, I thought we'd go to Europe, and we were 5 years behind the Europeans already. They'd all been training and sailing against each other a lot with coaches and developing these little groups, and Australia was quite often playing, catch up. And obviously there's some exceptions, as we spoke about, those generational talents. But for me, going into the radial worlds in Holland as a 15-year-old, I thought, mate, I'm doing all right here in Australia. I'm going to go over there and crush it. And I had no idea. It was quite an eye-opener. And it was, again, good lesson to be part of. But I think...
is there a people shortage or...
in the offices of Yachting Australia? No, there's not a people shortage.
People on the ground, perhaps? People
on the ground, probably sailors. How do we get those people and keep them staying in the sport, whether they're going to make an Olympics or not? You still need them there to help bolster that base level to get those generational talents up to the world-class level that they need to be and that we all want them to be at and succeed. Yeah.
Well, through season 3 of Bulwarks and Bulldust, we will be focusing a lot on youth pathways and how to keep people in sailing and what comes next. Thanks, Shane, for everything today. Much appreciated. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, give us your feedback. We do very much value it. See you on the next episode of Bulwarks and Bulldust. I did forget to mention earlier on the intro, we're standing here in front of Volkstar, yeah baby, the 2024 Sydney to Southport overall champion that Safe Shane makes the sales for. It's going all right, right?
Yeah, it's looking nice and clean up here, and looks small on the size of the boatyard that we're in there.
Absolutely, right. It's a magnificent facility here at the Boatworks. Thanks for coming on the Shane.
Thanks for having us.
On the Shane. On the show. Shane.
Thanks for having us, man.
No problems. Let's see you next time. Make sure you tune in, like, subscribe. We'll see you next time on Bulwarks and Bulldust.